Long-time viewers of the channel will know that a couple of years ago, Andy's symptoms of autism anxiety reached such a fever pitch that he started refusing to go to school and didn't go back for a year and a half, which obviously had some pretty significant impact on our family and is one of the main reasons why this channel now exists in the form that it's in. The parenting autism video I put out last weekend on autism and puberty went down so well that I thought, you know what, let's make it a series. Let's do one of these once a week. This week we're going to talk about school refusal and the impact that it had on us, and we've even got a snazzy new intro. Hello and welcome to the second entry in our Parenting Autism series. This is going to be a playlist where every week we have a look at one of the issues or challenges of being a parent of a child with autism. We're going to take a load of questions from you guys, share our experiences, get some of your input as well, and just basically have a little bit of a chat about the impact that some of these bigger issues that we all worry about have on the lives of both us and our children. If that sounds like something up your street, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future videos. And of course, leave a nice big thumbs up on there as well to show that this is the kind of thing that you would like to see us doing here on the channel. So, as with the format that we had last week when we talked about puberty, this week for school refusal, I put messages out on all of the social media links that you just saw up on the screen a second ago, possibly with the exception of Snapchat. We'll do Snapchat next week, asking for your questions and experiences when it comes to autism and school refusal with your kids. And as with last week, we were absolutely inundated with responses, so we're going to follow the same format that we followed then. I'm going to go through the questions that have come in. There's, just like before, there's been a lot of people asking fairly similar things, so where that's happened, I've just picked out one example of that question that we're going to answer. So if I didn't get to your question or don't get to your question, don't take it personally. I apologise, I've just gone with the first one that I found, and if we got similar questions, I've kind of mushed them all together into one answer. But please keep your questions coming in for future videos in this series, because they really what make these videos. And I think we all, me included, got a lot of value out of last week's one on puberty, and hopefully that will continue with school refusal this week and some of the other topics that we've got for future weeks. If you want to suggest a topic for one of these videos, that's what the comments are for. So just like with last week, before I jump into the questions, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on our story when it comes to autism and school refusal. I hinted about it in the little intro section before, but Andy first, I say first, it wasn't. It was the first time he really got into school refusal. But the first time he actually refused school was when he was still at primary school. We're probably going back 4 or 5 years, where he just one day decided he didn't want to go and refused to go for a couple of weeks, and then eventually just randomly decided to go back. We never found out why he didn't want to go. We never found out what the trigger that let him go back was. And then it just kind of stopped for a couple of years, and we assumed it was just a weird couple of weeks. He'd always been a little bit iffy about it. School had never been something that he'd really enjoyed. When he was a lot younger, sometimes Anna would have to strap him into his pushchair to walk him there. When he was very young, because he just wouldn't walk, he wouldn't want to go. I know when I first met Anna and Andy, and they were still living over in Nottingham, and I would walk to school with them some days, there'd be some days, and Andy was probably 7 or 8 at this point, where he would just drop to the floor halfway to school, try and run off home. Anna would have to carry him. Got to the point where I would sometimes carry him, and it was always a case of, well, he doesn't really want to be here, but he's little, and we can just pick him up and take him there, and there's not much say that he has in it. So kind of papering over the larger issue, which was that he didn't want to be there. Then when they moved over here to Lincolnshire, it wasn't a case of walking to a school round the corner anymore. The primary school Andy went to was 20 miles away from our house. So it was a taxi every day. Anna doesn't drive. I would be going to work every morning, so I would leave before Andy goes to school in the morning, and then the minibus for the school, which is a local taxi company with someone on there to supervise the kids who run it, the minibus would come round, collect the kids, and they'd go off to school. I think it's a fairly standard thing, particularly out in fairly rural areas. But like I say, one day he just refused to get on the taxi, and then he refused the next day. And when it's a case of you've got to get him on the taxi there and then, and if he doesn't go, he's got out of school for the whole day. I think he learned fairly quickly that was a tactic that worked. And just stopped going for a couple of weeks, and then something clicked in him, just like that, and he started going back. And it was never a problem again at primary school, and it was never a problem during his first 3 or 4 months at secondary school. But then back in January 2016, it happened again. There was a couple of issues leading up to it that we think were major contributing factors. For a start, it was January, and we talked recently about how he really struggles in the winter. He gets ill in the winter. He loses a lot of weight in the winter. We think he's got seasonal affective disorder. It's not diagnosed though, and even if it is, there's not much we can do about it other than the light therapy stuff that we're going to be starting and trying to help him with it. Is pretty much as far as we've got exploring that. But January, December, there were always big issues for him anyway, so he was already fairly low mood. But then the taxi broke down on the way home from school one day, and they were just kind of sat there for, I think it was about 45 minutes while they waited for a replacement minibus to come from the taxi company. They still got them home, but he really didn't like that. He was trapped in the taxi for like 45 minutes with all the other kids and hated it. And then the next day he was poorly. So Anna went in on the bus to fetch him at like lunchtime, brought him home. He was ill. It was that time of year when he's ill a lot. So he was ill. But I think the fact that she'd gone and picked him up taught him that school was optional. School, maybe optional is the wrong word, but taught him that actually, you know what? This place that I don't like getting to, it's possible to leave it. That's interesting. I wonder if I don't have to be here at all. And then from the very next day, he refused to get in the taxi the next morning. He still wasn't 100%, but he'd been going in not 100% for a couple of weeks because of the nature of what he's like in December and January. And at the time, we thought, okay, this is a pain for all involved, but it's probably just because he's ill. Hopefully, it will sort itself out in a week or two when he starts to feel better, like it did last time. And it never did. And at the time, Anna was in her first year of uni, just like she's just finished now. And when it came round to the end of January and it was time for her to go back to uni, she wasn't able to go back because Andy was still refusing to go to school. I was still working full-time as a teacher, so I wasn't there to drive him to school or help support Anna getting him to school or help her look after him during the day. So when it came, and we've got no family locally, so when it came round to her having to go back to uni, she started just ringing up saying, look, I can't come in today, he's still off. And that went on for a few weeks, and then he carried on being off and she carried on being off. And I think it got to about February, March time of 2016 this would be. And at that point, the uni said, look, are you actually coming back this year or not? And I said, well, no, probably not. I can't give you a date when I'm going to be back. We don't know when he's going to be back at school. And at that point, she dropped out of uni and he continued to refuse. Not only was he continuing to refuse to go to school or even entertain the idea of going to school, he also started to refuse to leave the house, refuse to cooperate. And it very quickly, over the course of probably, I would say by April, May that year, Anna and Andy were effectively locked in the house 24/7. Certainly when I wasn't here to take him out on a trip to a church or try and relieve some of that pressure a little bit. We had no respite care at the time, and there was no support available at all. We didn't have a social worker or anything at the time. We were completely on our own, didn't know what to do, and all we knew was Andy wasn't cooperating. He wasn't taking any medication at that point. He had nothing prescribed for anxiety. We didn't know he had anxiety. It wasn't diagnosed at that point, so he was refusing to cooperate with anything. All he wanted to do was sit on the chair and use his iPad or his PlayStation. And if we tried to take him away from that at any point, he would have a meltdown. And you've seen some examples of meltdowns that he's had on the channel before. So Anna couldn't leave the house. She very quickly became really down about the whole thing as well. And I think they both got trapped in a sort of cycle of anxiety and just misery. And it was a really, really, really challenging time for us. And eventually we did get him back, which I think is probably a story for another video maybe, or we might answer it in some of these questions. I don't want to talk for 40 minutes about this. This is actually what my talk at the Autism show in a few weeks is going to be about. So you'll hear, when I put that here on the channel, you'll see more detail on how we actually got him back. But it was, in the end, 18 months that he was off for. And by the time he got back to school, that was September last year, I'd quit my job to offer some support to Anna and act as Andy's carer and try and help with the process of getting him back. If nothing else, I was going to be able to drive him to school, which would have been something that wasn't available as an option before. And without question, I think both me and Anna, and probably Andy as well, and the girls, we would all say that 18 months when Andy was refusing to cooperate and refusing to go to school was probably the hardest time of any of our lives. It was a rubbish time. It was awful. And I think without leaving work when I did and being able to pull my weight a little bit more and eventually able to get him back, I don't know if as a family we'd have survived to the point that we have now. We were very close to breaking point as a family. This isn't what this video is supposed to be about. We'll talk about this more another time. Let's get into some questions. Do you think he'll ever refuse to go again? And do you think he was ever behind because he missed 14 months? Or did you and Anna work with him? Why did he refuse at first? We don't know why he refused. That's one of the things. I think I said it a second ago, and maybe I didn't. There were a few things that kind of were triggers to cause it in the first place, but we don't actually know why he refused. We don't know why he didn't want to go. Do we think he'll refuse again? He might do. We didn't think he was going to do it when he did it. We don't know what caused it, and at any point I guess he could start doing it again. He seems happier with school than he's ever been before, but that's not to say that he won't just wake up on Monday morning and think, you know what, I don't really fancy it today, I'm not going to go in. And we could be right back where we were a year and a half ago. Did he miss any time because of it? Not really, because he's not working to any kind of schedule, or he's not working towards exams at certain points. He's not there to come out of it with GCSEs or qualifications. He's there to help with social skills and just help him progress towards becoming as independent as he can be in his life. The priority for Andy at school is for him to get used to going to school, get used to being around people, learn how to behave appropriately, learn how to function in society. They do things like taking them to the shops and teaching them how to use a toaster and, just really simple stuff. And that's more what Andy's school is about. There's no pressure for him to be at a certain reading age or a certain mathematical ability by a certain age. So I certainly wouldn't ever say he fell behind in anything, because there was nothing to fall behind. He'll progress at his own pace, and that won't ever be a linear progression. He'll sometimes surge forward in stuff like we've seen him do with maths this year, and sometimes he won't make any progress with anything for 5 years, and that's fine too. When Andy was a year into refusing school, would you think you'd ever get where you are today with him volunteering to come into school every day and not miss a day? We always hoped, you have to hope, if we'd have allowed ourselves to think that the situation we were in was going to go on forever, that's not going to do anyone's mental health any good. That would have been, it was unthinkable to suggest that we were never going to come out the other side of it. Everyone goes through hard times and you come out of them, and you have to believe you're going to come out of them. So we were always working towards this point. We didn't know when it would come. We could never be absolutely certain that it would, but this is what we were working towards. And we certainly had visions of being at this point. Did we think it would go as well as it has, as quickly as it has? Probably not. But I think it's nice to get a little bit of good luck every now and again. And I think putting it down to luck probably does us a disservice as well. I think both us and all the professionals involved worked incredibly hard for a long, long time to get to this point, and I think it's the reward for all that hard work, which is awesome. He's done really, really well. What's it like for parents having to go through kids refusing to go to school as long as Andy did? Miserable. Just miserable. I mean, just think about the sort of things that you do as parents or that your parents do. None of that was available to us. We couldn't go to the supermarket together. Let's scale this back from we couldn't have date night and we couldn't go for weekends away together. We couldn't nip to the shop together to choose what we wanted for dinner. We couldn't walk Dave together. There was never a time when we were alone together. Andy was always there, and he was always this close to having a meltdown, and he was never cooperative, and there was no respite from it. There was no medication for Andy to take the edge off. There was no support from anybody. There was no break. It was 24/7 for a year and a half of Anna and Andy being sat in our living room, effectively, apart from when they slept. I'm not going to get too into that side of things this week, because I've already decided that next week's topic in this series is going to be something along the lines of the stress and the pressure on parents of being a parent of someone with autism. So we'll dig into that side of things a little bit more next week. Be ready for a request for questions on that on social media in the near future. What does Andy hate most about going to school? He loves going to school now. That's the crazy thing. He absolutely loves going to school. We don't know what he didn't like about it before. We think it was probably just it took him away from what he wanted to be doing. He wanted to be at home on his iPad or on his PlayStation. That was the routine he'd got himself into, and that's the routine that he wanted. And now what he loves about school is the fact that it offers him that structure and routine. Yeah, I don't think he ever hated school. I think he just was anxious about the break from the routine of what he had established at home over such a long amount of time. Would you reward Andy going to school every day of the month without being told to? We do that. Those trips that we go to Grantham or where we go to Nottingham, I mean, it's usually been Nottingham, but we always give him the choice. When the first day of half term or the first day of any school holidays, we always give Andy a choice of where he wants to go for his rewards, and we make it very clear that he's earned that by going to school every day. So the most recent several have been to Nottingham, where he gets to ride around on the tram, and he gets to completely plan the day himself, so he can ride the tram, go on his route where he wants to go to the places he wants to go to, and they are his rewards, and he knows he only gets to do those trips if he goes to school. At this point, he's going to go to school even if we took those away, I think, but we're certainly not going to take the reward away anytime soon, because it's a fun day for everybody, and also just when it might get hard for him, allows him to focus in on the fact that, okay, it might be a bit miserable today. I might not really fancy what we're doing here, but I want to go to Nottingham in 2 weeks' time. Or I think this time he's probably going to choose Skegness. So I want to go to Skegness. I want to go and stand in the sea. I want to see the pier. And that's his motivator for doing it when he doesn't feel like he wants to. But like I say, at the moment, he wants to go every day. He's asking for it. Have we ever been fined for Andy being off school? We haven't. We had, around about this time last year, we had the letter threatening court action. Might lead to the fine, but all we did was got an extended diagnosis from his not from the GP, from the guy at CAMS. I'm not actually sure what his job title is. I guess he's the psychiatrist who diagnosed him with anxiety. The reason we got the letter from the school, and I think we've talked about this on the channel before, but the reason we got that letter threatening the fine is because the letter that we got through from CAMS was explaining the absence he'd had up to that point, but didn't sign him off for further absences. So although he'd been off for a year and a half, around about April last year, the letter came through saying he was off for this amount of time for autism and anxiety. But then the wording at the end of it was, however, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be trying to get Andy back into school, or some kind of quite fluffy wording to that effect, which the school and the local authority interpreted as, okay, he was ill, now he's better and should be coming, so everything from this point on is an unauthorised absence. So when we got that letter, it was for like 6 weeks of unauthorised absence from the date of the confirmation from CAMS. It wasn't for the full 18 months. But then we got back in touch with CAMS and said, look, this wording is causing us problems. Can you please confirm to the school he does still have anxiety? Change the wording. We obviously want him to go back, but at the moment he's refusing. So can we change that wording up and get the current absence authorised? Because it is for a medical condition. It's for anxiety. And they did that in the end, and that took all the heat off. And then he went back to school shortly afterwards anyway in September. If he refused school for a long period of time, would you ever consider homeschool or other options? We explored homeschooling way back when, and very quickly decided it wasn't going to be something that worked for us, despite the fact that I'm a qualified teacher. And it wasn't even a decision that was made based on what was best for us or what was best for Andy. I think ideologically it would have been quite a good solution to the problem, but certainly in the UK it just doesn't work financially at all, because even though schools get funding per pupil for their education, if you take a kid out of school and homeschool them, you don't get any of that funding. So you don't get to have the textbooks paid for, the materials paid for. You have to buy all that stuff yourself. You have to buy the courses. You'd have to pay the exam entries yourself. But also there's no compensation for the person who's acting as the teacher. So it's not a case of, well, we can just homeschool him and then claim loads of benefits to do it and that will pay the bills. It doesn't work like that. We'd basically have to, for us to have made the decision at the time to homeschool him, it would have involved me resigning from my job as a teacher and then being Andy's teacher for free, without, plus having to find extra money to pay for the materials we'd need to be able to do that. So we'd suddenly have no income coming in and extra expenses, and very quickly we'd have found ourselves homeless. There's just no viable way for it to happen. In theory, Anna could have done it, But the solution to Anna and Andy being trapped in the same room as each other wasn't, right, let's formalise this and say you're going to be trapped in this room for the next 5 years, because that just wasn't at all fair on Anna. She needed, as much as Andy needed to get back to school, Anna needed him to get back to school for the sake of her own mental health. When Andy got back into school, you'd take him to a church McDonald's beforehand. Do you think this is vital, that an autistic child gets rewards when they do something they don't particularly like, and was that a huge part of how you got him back into school? I think it's really important. He has to have a reason to want to do it. He's very, very matter of fact and literal, and if there's no reason why he would want to do it, why would he do it? So to his mind, going to school was a really unpleasant experience at the time, because he didn't want to be there, he didn't want to engage with what was going on there, so he would just go there and lie down and then come home again. And as far as he was concerned, he could lie down at home. Now, over the last year, they've actually integrated him completely into the class now. He doesn't go there and lie down anymore. He goes there and works and does activities and really enjoys it because of that. But at the time, he didn't see school as that. School wasn't somewhere where he could go and enjoy himself. School was a punishment as far as he was concerned. And to encourage him to go through something he really hated, we'd have to pile up the stuff that he liked, so the good stuff outweighed the bad stuff, to convince him to do the bad thing, similar to how we bribe him into taking his medication in the morning by giving him a can of Dr. Pepper. He hates the medicine, but he loves Dr. Pepper more than he hates the medicine, and he's willing to tolerate the medicine to get the Dr. Pepper, because he knows it's the only way he'll get the Dr. Pepper. So at the time, getting him to tolerate school to get a trip to a church or get a trip to McDonald's worked fantastically. And yeah, I think that had a massive part of getting him back to school. Andy can be ill quite a lot. When going through the refusal period, was it difficult to know whether he was actually ill or faking it? Is it more challenging with him with the lack of communication? Yeah, and that's where it all started. It's this whole January thing again, the January problem. When it started off with us getting a phone call from school to pick him up because he was poorly. And he was poorly, for a couple of weeks, and it was difficult to decide at what point he wasn't poorly anymore and he was refusing school, and I think we probably got that wrong, but I don't know how we could do any better to get it right, and that's why we're so careful about what we let him do when he's off school sick. We've got the video about having to take his iPad off him because he was refusing to go to school. A lot of people still comment on that today, saying, yeah, but if he's ill, playing on his iPod might make him feel better. And I absolutely agree, it might make him feel better. But equally, he might be pretending to be sick to be able to use his iPad, because using his iPad at home is more fun than going to school. And it's trying to figure out that balance. And it is something that we are getting better at slowly, but we still really struggle with. And yeah, it's as challenging as it is for any kid, but with the added layer of not having the communication or the facial expressions to let us know. I mean, he doesn't have any tells when he's lying, and contrary to what a lot of people might think, he is capable of lying. He is capable of being deceitful. For example, chewing the buttons off of his PlayStation Vita. I don't know if we've mentioned it. He's chewed the analog stick off of his Vita, and he's never once put that in his mouth in front of us. But we've caught him pulling it away from his mouth quickly as we've walked in the room. So if we've been in the kitchen and we walk in, his Vita suddenly slams into his lap. Well, he's obviously been doing something with that, and what he's doing is chewing on it when we're not in the room. So he knows he can't do that. He knows he definitely can't do it in front of us, so he hides the fact that he's doing it from us. And yeah, he can definitely be deceitful, but when we ask him about it, it's the same facial expression we'd get if he was telling the truth. So there's no tell. So that part of it is really challenging. What's the procedure in Britain for a child who is refusing to get to school? That was one of the biggest obstacles we came up against throughout the entire process, because there isn't one. There is no procedure. There's no set of rules. It's basically down to the discretion of the school and the staff who work there, and the local authority and the staff who work there. And you'll get different expectations in different schools in different parts of the country, and it is an absolute total mess, and something that one day, if I ever have the time or the influence to be able to make a change, I would love to be able to shake that system up a little bit. And then lastly, what does his school do to support him? If not much, what can they do to help more? Now they are fantastic, and to be fair to the school, even at the time, they were trying as hard as they could in difficult circumstances they were being forced to work in. They didn't have budget for what we needed to get him back, and we screamed from the rooftops about it at the time. We needed them to appoint him a TA there and then who could come out and get to know him at home, so he had a safe person that he knew who could then be with him at school. That's what we needed. There was just no way they could pay for that. There isn't money there for him to have a dedicated TA. They're messing around with their budgets internally to have a member of staff who's allocated to Andy, even though financially he's not entitled to one. But they're moving stuff around to make that happen. They are bending over backwards to make school something that he will enjoy, and they've done it. They've cracked it. He's loving it. They're doing a fantastic job. It's just the problem was I'm slowly starting to understand, and I guess I did get there a little bit slowly, but the problem was never with the school. The problem was above the school. The fact that the school had their hands tied. They had procedure that they had to go through, for example the letter threatening us with court action, and they had almost no money to work with, so everything we suggested was just met with a bang. No, can't do it. So the school and the people who worked there were always fantastic. The situations and circumstances they're forced to work in are impossible. One of the most frustrating things about education as a sector, it's one of the reasons I wasn't that unhappy about leaving the sector, and it's one of the reasons for what I was just saying about why when the time comes where I've got the time to dedicate to it, I would love to be able to help make the changes that need to be made. But we're a long way off of that. But that is it for the questions. Like I say, if your question didn't get asked, it's probably because it was very similar to one of the other questions. So please don't be offended if I didn't get round to your question, and please feel free to continue to submit questions for future topics in this series. I think we're going to be doing this series every Saturday for a little while. There's a topic that there's a list of topics that's already about 6 topics long, and it's being added to all the time as people suggest them. If you want to suggest a topic for a future video in the series, let me know. As I mentioned before, next Saturday's video is going to be about the pressures and strain that having a child with autism puts on a family, puts on the parents, and hopefully we'll be able to share some of your experiences about that, and you can ask questions about that. We'll put the question out on social media probably early on next week so that we can start collecting some responses and some of your experiences. And the idea of this series is we want to have a playlist as a resource that people who are in the situation we were in a year ago, 2 years ago, where we're feeling absolutely desperate and we don't know where to turn, they'll be able to type their question into YouTube, find a video of ours that answers the questions that they've got, whilst also showing them that they're not alone. There's this massive community of people who are all going through the same things as them, and there's this whole playlist full of topics of all the things that they might be struggling with that we can then hopefully help them out. Or even if we can't offer solutions, because we don't pretend to know everything, but even if we can't offer solutions, just being there to say, yeah, we've gone through that, or we're going through that. I know from where we were 2 years ago, that would have been a massive help to us, and we didn't know where to look for that stuff. So we want to create that resource in the form of this playlist. We're basically creating the videos that we wanted to be able to find and watch 2 years ago that would have helped us out. So hopefully that's been something that you found value in. If it has, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for us. Subscribe to the channel for the normal daily vlogs that we'll be back again tomorrow. We've got a Legoland vlog coming up tomorrow. It's going to be fantastic. So make sure you subscribe for that, plus for the continuation of this series next week. And just thank you very much for watching.